Okay, I just want to welcome everyone back here for our 11 o'clock session to round out the morning on our first day here of the LCAN convening. As we've been doing, feel free to utilize the chat box and the Q&A box throughout the session, and I'll be answering or sort of communicating the questions, making sure that Anne sees these as we move through the presentation today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Anne, who we all know and love, but I wanted to share a little bio for her as well, just to share additional things about Anne. So she has worked in the Community Engagement Division of Iowa College Aid, serving as the lead on the Iowa Local College Access Network grant series. And of course, as we know, LCANs use a collective impact model to increase college attainment in communities throughout our state. Anne earned her bachelor's in sociology with a Spanish minor from Drake University. And for the first 14 years of her career, she served victims of violent crime through the Crime Victim Assistance Division of the Iowa Attorney General's Office. She also worked as a grant writer and manager for Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Central Iowa before coming to work at Iowa College Aid. Anne is a lifelong Greater Des Moines resident and thinks Iowa is a great place to live and work. She is mom to an almost 21-year-old and an almost 13-year-old. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anne.
Thank you, Megan. And actually, my daughter just turned 13 last night. So I have going through the second teenager now. So in this session, we will discuss the key principles behind sustainability and continuous improvement from the Iowa College Aid perspective, specifically for LCANs. Tomorrow, Megan is going to share with you how these principles translate into deliverables for years 2, 3, and 4 of the LCAN grant series. We have a tool that will be shared, which will serve as a means to facilitate discussions with leadership teams and also to submit your deliverables around these two. So today's going to be more principles, and then tomorrow, your time with Megan, will get into the nuts and bolts of the deliverables and the expectations there. If you are in year 1 of LCAN or you're new to LCAN, this is all sort of food for thought, but really it's never too early to start thinking about sustainability. We want you to be talking about that early and often. I selected the song Won't Back Down by Tom Petty because to me it's a song about tenacity, persistence, resilience, and grit. And these are all qualities that we ask our students to possess as they navigate through, high school and hopefully on to higher education, not just for enrollment, but attainment. And I think, we're in a time where we really need that resilience and that grit. LCANs need it too, as we're trying to maintain our momentum, continue to, overcome challenges to meet and pivot to the needs of our community. So I guess I would just challenge you that, the things that we expect from students, we need to be looking to ourselves to have those things too, and to be showing up for students and for our communities through the local college access networks. And again, just thank you all for being here today, for showing up. Okay, so we've broken the concept of sustainability into programmatic and financial sustainability. So that's how I'm going to talk about that today. And you may be thinking programmatic sustainability, we tell you over and over that the LCAN grant does not support programs, it supports a framework. But when we talk about programmatic sustainability here, we're talking about your initiatives, your relationships, your work groups. How is the work that's being done going to be sustained? How are you building those mutually reinforcing activities that are going to be embedded into your community so that the LCAN is there, after the life of the grant? And then we're going to talk about financial sustainability, but it's important, and we did some discerning about this, that the programmatic piece comes first. You need to know what your mission is, what you're going out and asking partners and funders to support before you go and make that ask. Before I get into these two, I want to talk a little bit about sustaining that passion because that's an important piece too. You know, we talk about one of the collective impact conditions being the urgency for change. And you know, it's really up to the coordinator, the leadership team members to maintain that urgency for change and believe, you know, that college attainment is important in our community. You know, because if we don't believe it, then we certainly can't go out and ask community members to believe it and students to believe it. So if you'll indulge me for a little bit, I'm going to show a clip from the movie based on the book, The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. And to me, this is really sort of a depiction of collective impact. And I'd like you to just take a look at it and think about, you know, how this might relate to the ideas of collective impact, sustainability, and urgency for change. And then we will do a little bit of a Q&A after this.
You don't know me, but my name's Si. I'm just the O'Hare delivery guy. But it seems like trees might be worth a try. So I say, let it grow.
My name is Dan.
And my name's Rose.
Our son Wesley kinda glows. And that's not good, so we suppose we should let it grow.
Let it grow, let it grow. You can't reap what you don't sow. Plant a seed inside the earth. Just one way to know its worth. Let's celebrate the world's rebirth. We say let it grow.
My name's Mary, and I am 3. I would really like to see a tree. La 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 la. I say let it grow.
I'm Grammy Norma. I'm old and I've got gray hair. But I remember when trees were everywhere and no one had to aim for air. So I say, let it grow.
Let it grow, like it did so long ago. It is just one tiny seed, but it's all we really need. It's time to change the life we lead. Time to let it grow.
My name's O'Hare, I'm one of you. I live here in Thneedville too. Things you say just might be true. It could be time to start anew and maybe change my point of view. Nah, I say let it die. Let it die, let it die. Let it shrivel up and come on, who's with me, huh?
Nobody.
You greeted that bad.
Thank you, Ted.
Okay, thanks for indulging me there. I decided to just run the whole thing, but I'm just wondering if anyone has thoughts on why I might have shown that or what that has to do with collective impact, or maybe even, you know, things that you experience at your leadership team meetings. You can go ahead and comment or put that in the Q&A. So to me, it speaks to the importance of sustainability for one. Obviously, they're talking about sustainability in terms of the earth and bringing a tree back to life, um, the truffula tree, but it also is about the urgency for change because not everyone in the community, believed in the need for bringing back the truffula tree. And the protagonists in the film were kind of charged with bringing everyone together behind this common movement. And then you have the naysayer sort of saying, let the tree die. And, I think sometimes we experience that in our communities or in meetings when we're trying to build, a movement and create this college going culture. Okay, so now we're going to get into programmatic sustainability. The first component of this I want to talk about is effective collaboration. So how will partnerships and initiatives be maintained and strengthened over time? We want you to identify your relevant stakeholders who will continue to actively support the LCAN work, and that's rooted in the common agenda and the SMART goals. You need to have clearly identified roles and responsibilities. And this is why the continual review of that MOU that we ask you to build is so important. Is there a broad enough base of support in the community to sustain the initiatives of the LCAN? Effective collaboration has to do with meetings as well. So, during the life of the grant and after the life of the grant, defining, what frequency of meetings do we need to have? Is it once a month? Is it every other month? Is it quarterly? And then, what's happening in between those meetings? Are your action teams maybe meeting in the off month when your LCAN leadership team is not meeting? Location, after the life of the grant, do you have a partner that's going to commit to hosting your meetings? What kind of commitment do you have from team members to continue to participate in meetings after year 4 of the grant? And then that facilitation and continuous communication. Who is going to facilitate the meeting and how is continuous communication going to happen? So that coordinator role. And I will talk more about the importance of sustaining the coordinator role in a little bit here. Embedding the LCAN in the community. So how is the collective impact initiative, how is your LCAN embedded in the community? And this is where the collective impact condition of mutually reinforcing activities is so important. The collective impact forum defines mutually reinforcing activities as coordinated collective efforts to maximize the end result. So asking, are your leadership team members aligning and embedding the goals and work of the LCAN with the work of their home organizations? Are partner organizations aligned with LCAN goals and initiatives? Are community resources truly being leveraged in a coordinated way by the LCAN to maximize results? If these things are really happening, in theory, LCAN efforts will be sustainable because the work has been embedded into the fabric of the community. Another piece of programmatic sustainability is demonstrating results. So how are you going to evaluate your processes and your outcomes? How will you assess the effectiveness of the LCAN initiatives? So those interventions that you're putting in place in your community because you identified these barriers that need to be lifted so that more students and community members can have college attainment. So these are all part of the continuous improvement plan and work that we will talk about as well. But that last piece about utilizing funding to leverage current successes for future funding, that's an example of the overlap between programmatic and financial sustainability. Because being able to demonstrate results is a way to pave the way for future funding. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little about financial sustainability, planning for the future. So the plans and resources need to be in place to support the ongoing work of the LCAN after the life of the grant. So what does your year 5 budget look like? You can just use the LCAN grant budget as a template and test out a budget for year 5. We want you to have a projected budget with identified funding sources, and these can be secured and unsecured or requested funds that you haven't been awarded yet. So one suggestion would be to just, start with a list. And you can do this, as early as year 2 of the grant, a list of businesses, grants, partners that you want to reach out to for funding, and have a clear idea of your need. So again, that's why that programmatic sustainability piece comes in first. And then, create a workbook where you can add and revise to the budget, with tabs for secured funding sources and projected funding sources. And then you can build as you go. So again, it's important to have intentional planning for continued funding. And this includes an analysis of short-term and long-term funding needs. So, year 5 and beyond. We want you to develop a range of financing options, and have diverse funding streams. So thinking about what you want your budget to look like in terms of funding sources. Sustainability is enhanced when there are diverse funding streams. So when I say having a range of financing options, we are not just talking about, having applying for 50 grants instead of 5, or asking for donations from 45 businesses instead of 4, but we're actually talking about having a diverse blend of funding sources. So this is just a depiction of what a diverse budget might look like. And you'll notice that grants are just a small portion of the budget, and that's intentional. Other funding sources to be thinking about, an endowment. So, getting to know your community foundation, if you have one in your area. Is it possible to set up an endowment for your LCAN, or do community foundations offer ways for donors to choose to donate funds to your LCAN? In general, how are you making the LCAN and the work known to the community and to potential partners? It's important to have a uniform elevator speech with talking points that the leadership team members can use when talking to potential partners, and being able to make that case for the urgency for change around college attainment, and around your common vision, which again, is about your SMART goals and your common agenda. Another thing to consider, would the LCAN at some point want to build up a small revenue stream? And what types of goods or services or materials could the LCAN provide there? I really want to emphasize that it's important to lean on expertise from your CEO level leaders around the table in this area. You all have nonprofit experts at your tables when it comes to building a healthy budget. So seeking input from the team about what your what your budget should look like. Touching on coordinator position sustainability. So, our belief at Iowa College Aid is that the role of the coordinator is central to the continuation of LCAN work. That's why the majority of the funding that we award goes towards that coordinator position. If you were to decide not to continue that position, how would the functions be carried out after the grant series had reached completion? That coordinator position must be addressed through the sustainability plan, and this falls under financial and programmatic sustainability. And again, this is one that's important to be discussing early and often. So starting to talk in year 2, about what's going to happen to that position. Will it be housed with the fiscal agent or another partner? Will it be funded through a combination of outside sources? So next I'm going to talk about the other piece of the deliverable. We talked about sustainability, and then there's the continuous improvement plan. And data, this probably is no shock to you, is a huge part of what we want to see in your continuous improvement plan. So how will data be continually reviewed and incorporated into your goals, strategies, and work group initiatives? Tracking measures and processes. So the deliverables, as most of you know by this point, are constantly refined through each year of the grant. They're dynamic documents. They're a work in progress every year. So what is your process for continually updating deliverables, including your SMART goals, your common agenda, your data dashboard, your resource map, and your MOU. So when we talk about SMART goals, if you look at that A piece, that attainability piece, you know, does the goal still feel attainable based on the progress that's has been made so far, and based on the current and projected data? That R piece, you know, are your goals still relevant? And these are things that we, you know, should be looking at and thinking about now during the pandemic. And then that time-bound piece. So what happens when you reach that date that you set out in your original goals, in your common agenda? What is the process for taking a look at that date, knowing if you're on target to reach your goal, and then, you know, once you hit that date, what's the process for revising that if needed? The resource map, again, I just want to stress is a really important continuous improvement piece, because the landscape of your community is changing all the time, and, you know, maybe faster now than ever. So making sure that that document is still an accurate reflection of the resources that exist in your community. And then the MOU, you know, taking a look at that every year, because, you know, relationships change with time, and you might find that there are things that aren't working, or you might just find, when you look at it, you know, this just doesn't really reflect, like, what we're doing right now is working, but this document doesn't really reflect what we're doing. So having a process for reviewing and updating that. Evaluating processes and performance. So, you know, having a mechanism in place to evaluate the effectiveness of your meetings themselves, and then evaluating each of the LCAN roles. So not just the coordinator position, but having an evaluation process in place for your leadership team, for your fiscal agent, and for your work groups. And then we want you to evaluate your overall processes through an equity and inclusion lens. So how are you not only doing that inclusion piece, so making sure that minoritized people, underrepresented communities are represented at your table, but also, you know, how are you actually incorporating that input into your work? And how are you fostering a culture that values, you know, equity and inclusion? So, you know, people in the majority can speak up for equity and inclusion as well. And some of that is a training and education piece. So it's not just having that representation, but it's also, you know, incorporating the input and making sure that we're all sharing the load of making sure that, you know, we're valuing equity and inclusion at every level. Policies and procedures. So when we talk about policies for an LCAN, we're talking about things like bylaws. Does your LCAN feel the need to have bylaws for the leadership team? And then that MOU, does it have workable policies? What's included in the onboarding information that you're providing to new leadership team members? These are all examples of policies that the LCAN has in place. Professional development. So what's the plan for ongoing professional development, you know, after the life of the grant? Not just for the coordinator, but for every arm of the LCAN. And part of that includes, you know, ongoing training for equity and inclusion. You know, collective impact and college attainment are very dynamic fields, and so it's important to be apprised of the latest developments in those fields. And then, you know, in addition to that, what does your LCAN see as the biggest areas of professional development that need to be addressed? Because that might be different based on the goals that you've established and based on your community and the skills that you have around the table. So taking some time to discuss that and create a plan to fill those needs for professional development. And so I'm just going to close out again with a quote from the Lorax. It says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. I know this work can seem overwhelming, and I just want you to remember that the key to sustainability is maintaining that passion and that momentum and a sense of teamwork around the movement. So how do we maintain that urgency for change so that people continue to care about college attainment, especially now, not just around our leadership team tables, but in our communities. And so that's all I have, and I will go ahead and open it up for questions or comments. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can see you guys.
So we did have a comment in the chat box that I wanted to share. Donna had written, so many insights, everyone of every age has something to offer. And in order to create a college-going culture, we need all the insights and skills. We even need the naysayers to speak up. It is in considering objections that we pay attention to perspectives that may need to be updated and or changed to strengthen our efforts.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That is so important. And I think, you know, one thing that we are starting to expand from our perspective is our view and our definition around, you know, CEO level leadership and, you know, who should be at the table. You know, at the beginning of, I guess, my journey with collective impact. And, you know, I have to say too that collective impact, you know, some people see it as a new framework for social change, and other people that have maybe been around a long time say, you know, we've been doing this since like the 70s or the 80s, and they're just putting a name on it now. But the field continues to evolve. And one of the biggest things I've seen is that, you know, they were kind of like, whoa, we may have missed the boat here a little bit with equity and inclusion by, you know, insisting that it has to be the CEO level leadership at the table. And what we're trying to promote is sort of a hybrid. So yes, CEO level leadership is crucial, but you also need to make sure that you've got that representation from the community. So, you know, we all bring different value and different lived experience. So making sure you have that lived experience. You know, one thing that's really cool about the Black Hawk LCAN is that they've brought in some community member representation. And that was sort of a new, thing, you know, because it doesn't really fit the model. But it brings in that lived experience, you know, because how can we incorporate that if we're not actually in touch with what's going on in the community? So thank you, Donna. Other questions or comments?
As we're coming up on the noon hour, I think energy can sometimes start to flag at this point of the morning. So
yes, it's close to lunchtime.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see Alex's comment there, and we did. So the song that I picked was "Won't Back Down," but then I think we kind of went on to the next song, which was "Running Down a Dream," which is also a great song. So,
whoops, my bad.
Oh no, no, they're both good.
I saw Alex raise. Alex, did you raise your hand? I'm gonna turn on your ability to talk if you wanted to.
Oh, I just wanted to say I also really love that song in the Lorax too.
Oh, good. It's so hard when there's no feedback. It's like, is this like landing at all with people?
I'm just so like you went all the way through to O'Hare's version at the end.
I know. I probably should have cut it off earlier, but it's just a good thing all the way through, I think, for entertainment value, if nothing else.
I agree.
Well, you know, I won't keep you if there's no other.
Here we just had a question come in. Question or a comment from Carol. While the role of the coordinator is key, restricting LCAN grant funds largely to coordinator salary / benefits, etc., can make it somewhat more difficult to plan for sustainability.
Okay. You know, maybe we could talk more. This is where, you know, it would be great if we could have a dialogue, because I'd love to hear more about that. And I mean, you're right that we do, you know, we have decided that that position is the #1 priority. So I guess what we're asking you to do, or the hope is that, you know, early on you're thinking about what happens when this funding goes away, whether that's continuing with the position. Would like to share some of those responsibilities with others. Ah, I gotcha. And I think there are ways to do that, even with the, you know, the emphasis on funding for the coordinator position. But it's definitely something that we can talk more about one-on-one or, you know, in one of our coordinator meetings as well. It's tricky when we're talking about people's positions. You know, some of these conversations we have with coordinators, and then some of them we need to have with the fiscal agent and the leadership team. So maybe that would be a great follow-up meeting to have with our fiscal agents, I'm thinking, where you guys can actually talk and we can have a back and forth about it a little more. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. I am gonna make a note, you know, for a potential topic for a fiscal agent meeting, maybe in the next couple of months about that. Well, if there isn't anything else, I'll let you guys go for lunch, and then we come back at 1 with Dreama Gentry from Berea College, and we're really excited to have her to speak to the rural college attainment piece. You know, we are really pushing equity and inclusion, and the rural piece is a big part of that, you know, especially in Iowa. So I hope that you guys are all able to tune in for her at 1. Have a good break, and we will see you this afternoon.